Today we're talking with Rebecca Knight about women's self-defense. If you love what you see here, please do consider hitting the like button and the subscribe button below, and even checking us out over on Facebook or Patreon. Thanks a lot. Let's get on with the show. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason, and with me today is the inimitable Rebecca Knight. Hello, Rebecca.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Rebecca is an amazing specimen of martial artist. She's a 7th degree black belt, been training for more than 24 years. She's been featured in the Kempo Women website, in the books The Kempo Continuum and The Journey, Book 3. She's currently the co-owner and instructor at American Institutes of Kempo in Tucson, Arizona, and somebody I've known quite a long time and respected for a very long time. And I'm really happy to have you today to talk about one of the most important things I think a lot of martial arts instructors miss out on, where when you go to women's self-defense classes, so frequently it's a 6'3" ex-Marine cop teaching it, or old wrestler who's pushing 6 feet and weighs more than 200 pounds. And men like that, although they are successful martial artists in their own right, there are things we don't understand about women's self-defense for moms, just because our bodies are so different. So Rebecca, who is tiny and fierce, has agreed to come on today to tell us a little bit about what we don't know and what we can do better. Let's start, Rebecca. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that men are teaching women about self-defense?
Well, one of the biggest things is that you have to either perform the same way as a man, or that you cannot be trained on the same level as a man. Men have skill sets that we don't have, and we have to accept that. They have more upper body strength, they tend to have a lot more mass, and they're going to use more bludgeoning and strength-based concepts. Women have to be more aware. Awareness is key, and they have to pick the right targets, they have to pick the right tools, but they have to have speed and accuracy, and that's going to be one of the main things that's on their side. I find a lot of the time where women fall short in their training is they're not taken seriously. They're given the soft approach, they're just a girl and I'm not really going to try. Or you go the full opposite approach of, I'm going to show them how weak they truly are by overpowering them in a not so safe environment where I can show my dominance, but they don't get a chance to really fight back. A man could be bigger and stronger, get you in a bear hug, but if I gouge their eyes, hit him in the throat or hit him in the groin, that's the great equalizer that'll show with the strength of any size, whether it's a woman or a child or a gentleman who's on the semi-petite side, such as I am.
That's a great insight, and especially in terms of that you need to find the right training environment if you're going to pursue self-defense training, because there are there are enough spaces where a woman's not going to get the training the woman needs for either chauvinistic reasons like you're talking about, or just because the person teaching hasn't understood that those differences exist. I'll tangent for a second, tell a story about Lee Sprague, who you and I both had the joy of training under before he passed, where one of my very first classes as a white belt, I was coming in as a wrestler, as a macho guy who didn't understand a lot of things. And I was set up to spar against a female black belt, and she figured out I was taking it easy on her. And she told on me to Lee Sprague, and he made me work with her for the rest of class. And she beat the tar out of me. But again, she was taught in a way that accommodated the physical differences between her and, say, the aging high school jock that was up against her. Now, you've been in this system for a long time. You've been in the martial arts for a very long time. What are some of the things that you see taught that just don't work for you because of the differences in size, differences in upper body strength?
Things that are strength-based purely. Leverage is key. For somebody of my size, I have to use leverage completely. And there's a lot of places where I can apply the science of motion to make that happen. But if I try to, the term I use a lot, Hulk smash the same way as someone twice my size, I'm clearly going to end up inadequate because of it. I can use a lot of the same tools, but I may use them in a different manner. I have to pick the right targets, I have to pick the right timing, and I have to know where to be and most importantly, where not to be to employ it.
Now, picking the right timing, which is excellent advice, is often something that you can only do if you've trained substantially for a while. One of the first things that goes in a conflict situation when you're get that adrenaline dump is your fine motor skills and your not fine thought skills, but your cognitive thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Are there some things that you can advise someone who's a mom or a dad who's not really, they don't have the time, they don't have the inclination, they don't have the mindset to go dive deep into martial arts like you have, that they could think of and apply or use or practice now?
Absolutely. The two major things would be awareness and acceptance. Is if you can prevent a confrontation and you don't have to go to that level, guess what? You don't have to use the skill set that we train our entire career to have as a backup plan. If you can just be aware, like for kids example, I used to get so mad at my mom when she would tell me, I trust you, but I don't trust the environment. I called BS. I didn't believe it. I wanted to be powerful enough to be in any situation, but what I didn't understand was that I could be walking into a dangerous situation completely blind. And she was trying to save me from that. So acceptance that the world is not a safe place. Like a good friend of mine, Dawn Armstrong, she does a Think Safe seminar. And one of the major things she comes across in women's self-defense is they don't believe that they could be a target. They don't believe the environments they walk into every single day are not safe. She recently did a study where, in an interview within the women in her group, that they believe a college campus is one of the safest places they can be. And I know otherwise from my own experience and talking to a lot of cops and friends of mine that work on college campuses, but it's that complacency of it's not going to happen to me and my environment is safe, so the awareness diminishes. If the awareness diminishes, the opportunity to defend yourself diminishes. So if you're aware that it's a potential threat, then you can start making the steps and plans to address it. So keeping your eyes open, knowing the environment around you, getting off that phone. That is one of the number one things. If your face is buried in that phone, you're not going to have an idea of what's going around you. And if you're not aware of it, you can't plan for it. You can't defend against it.
Shameless plug, Dawn has in fact agreed to be another guest on our show in the upcoming weeks. Really smart woman with a lot of great ideas. It's interesting that you mentioned acceptance, because one thing that I have read is that because of the way that Western society trains women to think and trains women to behave in social situations, there's also the issue of accepting that bad things are happening now, that there's a tendency to deny that this person who is standing alarmingly close to your vehicle as you walk to it could possibly be a danger. Yes. And also an unwillingness to be rude about that or confrontational about that, and both in terms of just social awkwardness, social anxiety, and in terms of you don't necessarily want to be rude to a man because life has taught you that their reaction might also be dangerous, that you could provoke danger. Are there some things that you could say about that? So could you address that?
Absolutely. My late teacher, Sigang Labauni, one of his famous lines, and I didn't realize what it was until he came full circle. He called me Miss Rebecca, and he'd come up to me and say, Miss Rebecca, you're so sweet. And I thought that was the compliment of a lifetime. And he looks at me and he goes, I hate sweet. Sweet doesn't mean you survive. He goes, you have to be confident. You have to be absolute. And so if you're willing to accept that you're worth fighting for, a lot of women, they take the victim role subconsciously. Oh no, they didn't mean it that way. They weren't trying to be aggressive. I'm gonna be demure. No, you need to stand up. You need to look somebody in the eye. Dawn teaches this incredibly well, so I'm gonna keep pimping her too. She teaches incredibly well. If someone's in your environment, make eye contact. Let them know that you're aware and you're not okay with them being there. Use your voice, be confident. Sigang would speak of using your mom voice, whether you're a mom or not, yell stop. You can cause a split-second pause in your opponent's intention. You have the opportunity to either respond or remove yourself for that environment. So don't be demure. Don't let somebody walk over you as far as space constraints or the way they communicate with you, because if you stand your ground from the get-go, you're less likely to have to stand your ground with your fists. You stand your ground with your voice, your tone, and your body language.
Standing. Now, in your experience, are there some very specific ways that women can alter their body language, alter their voice, or choose to enter a physical, or vocal, or mental space that can help them avoid a conflict becoming physical?
Absolutely. Eye contact. Your tone says everything. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Don't reason with someone who's being difficult with you, who's trying to, one of the things that Dawn talks about a lot, someone asks you uncomfortable questions, probing questions. You don't owe them a response. You don't owe them to stay put. You don't have to worry about it being awkward if you leave the environment. Get your behind out of there. You have to value you above anyone else's feelings in the moment if you feel unsafe. Trust that spidey sense, that little thing on the back of your head. And if they get close enough where you feel like you do have to physically defend, you want to prepare yourself. You want your hands above your waist. You want them active, whether you can cross them if you want, but I would recommend something close to your center where you can launch either a defense or an offense as needed. But you want to prepare yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally that if there's an altercation, you're worth fighting for. You have base skill sets, even if it's just your fingertips and their eyeballs. You got a plan and you can use it, and you're empowered to do so.
And having a plan and believing, like you say, that you are worth defending. And as this is a parents show, I think most moms, even if they don't really believe that of themselves, they certainly believe that of their children, that your kids are worth protecting, defending. They're worth being rude to a stranger in a parking lot.
Yes.
They're worth being seen as overly aggressive or bitchy or whatever, because these are your kids and this is your family and you're all worth it. Now, I know you took a lot of notes before coming in here because I know how detail-oriented you are. What are some questions that I haven't asked you yet, because I don't even know what to ask about the experience of somebody who's not my physical size and my physical history might have in a self-defense situation? What are some of the things that I haven't asked?
Well, I would just outline kind of the three things that I would tell anyone who said, is how could I prepare myself for an altercation and survive it? I think a lot of times people say, did you win? Did you lose? It's not about winning or losing. It's about surviving it, whether you're surviving it emotionally or surviving it physically. And awareness and acceptance is the number one thing. And in Parker's Infinite Insights, he talks about the 8 considerations of self-defense. And the number one factor is awareness. Awareness that it's not a safe environment, awareness that you could become a victim if you don't keep those eyes open. And then acceptance of the situation as well. Secondarily would be combat mindset. And that's something that Lee Sprague taught amazingly well. And I know I'm preaching to the choir when I bring that up. And I know it may be a little bit more intense than a lot of moms may want to hear, but reality is a little bit intense. He used to say, if you're ever in a self-defense situation, make them your bud. And what was he talking about? Do not stop defending yourself till they're broken, unconscious, or dead. And if you want to take it to a minimum, just don't stop defending yourself until they're no longer a threat to you in any way, shape, or form. But you have to be able to snap into that combat mindset. That doesn't mean being a bully when someone pops off at you or being aggressive to your brothers and sisters. I have 7 of them. Some of them that have deserved a little free Kempo lesson, and none of which have received it because I had to make sure I followed the values that were in place and taught to me. But if somebody pushes that boundary where you are no longer going to be safe, someone you love is no longer going to be safe, you have to have the combat mindset to engage and not second guess yourself and not be timid. You've got to go into whatever mode you need to do and get done what you need to get done. And then the last, which a lot of people may not do but may want to consider, is you got to develop a skill set. You're going to have a knee-jerk reaction anyway. My husband likes to scare me all the time on a side note. And I scream, I ki in response. But it's a developed reaction. My hands always come up. I always get to a guard stance. But I'm going to do something automatically. What I do automatically, I can train. I can plan for. I can prepare for. Yes, I'm going to be in fight or flight. Yes, I'm going to be stressed. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. But if I've reps anything out enough, even if it's just yelling stop, getting my hands up and looking that person in the eye, I have a pre-developed skill set that I can go to if I need.
One of my other favorite instructors, Dave McNeil, Soke Dave McNeil, has a whole system based on, this is the first thing. He calls it the oh shit block, because you say that when you do that, and it's actually very similar to a number, especially Muay Thai, boxing, a number of different combative stances. And your body will, in fact, respond in a way that's designed to protect you in that first instant of adrenaline. And then what it sounds like you're recommending is, even if you don't want to go down the path of becoming a 7th degree black belt, you can train enough and think enough about, okay, so I'm here, what am I going to do next? How am I going to get from here to out? And as parents, there's that secondary consideration of, okay, so I've gone here, I've got my 5-year-old here and my 14-year-old over there. How am I going to get us out? Which is a whole nother ball of wax. And we'll actually be interviewing a professional bodyguard about that.
Awesome.
In a later episode. But so those 3 areas of defense, and it was awareness, it was combat mindset, and it was training, are things that we absolutely do. And an unfortunate reality is that because men tend to be so much larger and stronger, and in many parts of the world have been in more physical altercations, that for women, they should focus on these mental aspects, on outthinking the bad guy, on being more mentally prepared.
Absolutely. And something I do want to bring up as well is it wasn't incredibly recent. It might have been a couple years ago. I had seen an article about a woman who was abducted. And she was abducted not because they had a weapon. They simply grabbed her by the wrist and she felt helpless and overpowered. And one of the main things I could teach any of my students is you have to understand the science of it. Think of it like those finger traps. A wrist grab is not that difficult to get out of if you're aware of the weaknesses of your opponent. It doesn't matter how big and strong their arm is, their grab, they've got a thumb on one side, you go against the weakest point. And if you move towards the attack momentarily, you can leverage your way out of it. Mr. Knight is just about twice my size. He's a lot stronger than me, but it doesn't matter how hard he grabs my wrist in an attempt. If I can respond and I can apply the proper science of it, I can get out of a wrist grab. I'm not going to necessarily beat him up if I don't want to, but I can get out of a wrist grab and I can escape. So just having awareness of simple skill sets. I teach my women, especially the kids in classes, this constant. I tell them to be the blender. I tell them all the time, we're making bad guy smoothies, which means if they get within the range where you have to defend yourself, use your elbows, use your knees, drive with your head, but there's things that you can do to make it uncomfortable for them to address you rather than you being uncomfortable that they're getting in your space.
Excellent. So this concept of the blender, where if you get within grabbing range, you're just, whatever's hard on you that's near something soft on them, you go ahead and whack them with it.
Oh, yes.
Are there some other simple concepts like that that some of our parents who don't have time to go train might be able to think about and practice?
Yes, definitely. Try not to use force on force. If they're bigger and stronger than you, try to move off the line, deflect. And some of the best targets you can do is eyes. Gouge them in the eyes, use your fingers. If they can't see you very well, they're less likely to be able to attack you or injure you. Strike to the throat. It's a great impact zone. Hit them in the groin. You buckle them in half. If you can hit any of those 3 targets and or just be off the line so you don't have their full force, you're gonna stand a better chance of surviving and escaping.
Can you address real quick what off the line means in this context?
That means if like they're directly in front of me and they're pushing towards me, I don't need to move back, stay on those railroad tracks. I'm going to step my body off the railroad tracks and turn and deflect some of the energy that they're giving me.
So getting out of the way.
Yes.
So if a train's coming to hit you, you step off the tracks. You don't try to shove the track back or stand there or...
Unlike the horror movies where you run on the tracks to get away, don't do that.
In heels, no less. Yeah, yes. In a straight line.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so not meeting force with force. If they get close enough, hit soft parts of them with hard parts of you.
Yes.
Eyes, throat, groin. Those are all very good at it. What are some other ones? I'm just going to milk you for information. What are some of the other best ones you can recommend to a novice or somebody who doesn't train for one reason or another to get themselves out of a serious situation, especially, again, for moms who are going to be maybe a bit smaller?
Fair enough. One of the best things you can do is we call it caging up. Get your hands up and protect your supercomputer. If your supercomputer shuts off, you can't defend yourself. So just simple concepts of getting those hands up and moving yourself off the line and creating a cage where they can't injure you, but you can still employ the strikes to the targets that you would need to. My late teacher, Sigung Labouni, he had something he would have us chant at the end of every single class. And to backtrack a little bit, he was a cop, and he actually worked in sex crimes against women and children. So he got to see the worst of things, but he got to see some of the most courageous women and children he had ever met. And he goes, it wasn't the bigger, the stronger, the tougher people that survived these types of attacks. He goes, it was the people that had the mental strength to overcome it. And he had us chant at the end of every class, not me, not today. So if you're getting to that fight or flight, you're getting to situations that you can't talk down verbally, you have to believe this is not your day. They're not going to take me out. Not me, not today. And he would have us chant that over and over and over again until we believed it enough to act upon it.
So Mrs. Knight, we were talking before the show about how you have an exciting event coming up with your school in Tucson. And anybody who does live in Tucson who's looking for some self-defense lessons, I cannot overstate the quality that there is there at AIK, but you have something special going on.
Yeah, we actually have a lot going on right now. We're still running our school virtually. We're kind of rolling with the punches with the times. We're accepting new students via Zoom. So we're giving people the opportunity to not only empower themselves, but also get a healthy outlet when there's a lot going on, a lot of stress going on. We have a huge winter camp going on this December. We've run one every single year, all the way back to 2006, where we're gonna have several of our high-ranking instructors and master council coming down to keep us in line and make sure that we're perfecting our technique and moving forward and making our students better. But my husband and I also have a personal achievement next year. It marks the 20th year of this location in this plaza, and it empowers us because we know we've had the opportunity to give the gift of self-defense and confidence to a lot of people that keep coming back for more, bringing their kids down the road, bringing their friends and family, and it's created an environment of empowerment that we would love to continue for as long as we are capable of.
Outstanding. And right now, because of COVID, you guys are also doing distance courses.
Yes, sir.
So even if you don't live in Tucson, you can get some training through Mrs. Knight and Mr. Knight and their partner, Mr. Pilch, just by reaching out. We'll have the website and some emails in the show notes for anybody who's interested. Now, Rebecca, when we spoke to prepare for this interview, we had also talked about just myths of self-defense. And I think there's two different kinds of myth that we encounter. And one of them is the myths of self-defense that are made popular by movies, by media, by people who've trained for 9 months or 18 months and then opened up a shop thinking they know about self-defense, and that get perpetuated out. Could we discuss some of those self-defense myths and what the realities are?
Absolutely, and I'm going to refer to the Karate Kid, where he said, if do right, no can defend. That's not true. They're in the counter to the counter to the counter to the counter. And I think false confidence in that one thing's going to be the end all is one of the greatest myths for anyone, man, woman, or child. If they think I have to do one block or one punch and that's it and that's all I prepare for, or this is the secret or perfect technique, there's no secrets. There's just showing up, there's training, there's awareness, there's trying. And also instructors that will give their students a false sense of empowerment if they do it good enough, but they don't try to make them better. If I think I have a good enough front kick, but somebody charges into me and my good enough is not enough, I have a false sense of empowerment that could actually cost me in the long run. So you want to find an environment and a teacher that doesn't blow smoke up your skirt, so to speak. They give you the real empowerment through the effort and the trial and the sweat and figuring out what doesn't work for you along the way, rather than a you got it, a bunch of claps and balloons, and then you can't use it later.
I like that you mentioned individualized training. There's a lot of training out there that feels like it's one size fits all. And a lot of the time that is based on this idea that this is the one thing that will always work. And of course there isn't one. And of course, as we've been talking about, there is no one size fits all. The solution for a 6'3" linebacker is not the solution for a 4'11" jockey. Right?
I'm taller than that jockey, for the record.
And how about some of the misconceptions for self-defense for women? And there's that chauvinistic level where there are some men out there, unfortunately, who still think that women can't fight or whatnot like that. And those people are best ignored. But I think there's also misconceptions that just stem from that lack of awareness that the reality, the techniques will be different, the execution will be different, the situation will be different for men and women as opposed to men. What are some of the biggest misconceptions you've come across? Maybe things that you've been taught that you, even in the moment you were thinking, nah, that's not going to work for me.
Fair enough. Well, I would tell them if they think that women can't fight, they should go do a couple rounds with Holly Holm. I guarantee you they're going to change their mind. um,
Yeah.
but I think it's basically just trying to make women perform like men can. Because if you're trying to say just put more muscle into it, put more power into it, put more backup mass into it, well, I don't have that. I'm 5 foot on a good day and 115 pounds. I have to use leverage. I have to use timing. I have to use accuracy. I have to use a scalpel where they might use a sledgehammer. So I have to pick my targets, pick my timing, and pick my positioning more carefully than a man would, because he could come in John Wayne fist blazing. Well, I don't have that backup and that skill and that ability because of my size. So it's often false that they believe that women are inferior. I would say kids, because I'm about kid size. I admit it. We're inferior because of our size and lack of strength, but it's just a completely different skill set that we would have to apply. I can't pretend that I'm as big and strong. I used to try to fight like I was bigger and stronger, and I always got run over until I started fighting my fight, not their fight.
And a lot of this seems to get back to being aware of those and having a plan
Yes.
going in, and then being able to execute that plan under stress while you're afraid in the dark with your kids screaming.
Yes.
And that gets to a level of mental preparedness to overcoming fear in the moment or channeling that fear into useful anger. I'm certain that you know some tricks and tips to do exactly that. So what are some of the best things you could do? For example, you're a mom, you've got your 7-year-old with you, you're walking out of a shopping mall or out of a Walmart late at night, and you see trouble. And we're going to, for the sake of this, we're going to assume that it's impossible if you just turn right around and go back inside, which is, of course, the best advice. And you're feeling the butterflies in the stomach. You're feeling your hands start to shake. You're feeling the adrenaline and the fear start to take control, putting you into a situation where you're not as good at defending yourself. What would you recommend you do right there to take control of that moment?
Take a deep breath, because you're going to have your air. Know where your kids are. Get them behind you. Make you the barrier between them and whatever danger they may be. Because you don't want to have to be running around and dealing with multiple things. You want it to be, they go through you. Keep your eyes on whatever's bothering you. Do not take your eyes off of them for a second, and use your command voice. If they're coming close enough that you feel unsafe, yell for them to step back. Yell for them to stop. You can use normally enough command to give them pause. And have a game plan with your kids. That's one of the best things you can do. Give them a place where they can go be safe, and you can deal with it, where you don't have to worry about them while you're dealing with your own fight or flight and what's going to happen in that self-defense scenario. Hands up, eyes up, awareness, mean what you say. Your tone and your body language could be actually the only thing you have to use in that environment.
I know a number of people who have been trained, and some of them not trained for very long, who can point to a situation where trouble was coming, and by assuming the right body stance, by using the right tone of voice, that told the bad guy coming towards them that this was not going to be as easy as they initially thought.
Yes.
Then the bad guy just turned around and went away.
Yep.
And because the bad guys are lazy and they're cowards, as a
They're
general
bullies.
rule.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're bullies. They want someone smaller, weaker, that they can domineer over, whether it's a verbal bully or physical bully. It's the same concept.
And by adopting stance and tone that make them think that you're not going to be the easy target, you can avoid that physical confrontation, which we all want to avoid. In fact, if you run into somebody who doesn't want to avoid it, that's somebody you should probably keep at arm's length anyway.
Yes.
Okay, so as walking into that situation, deep breath, get your kids to where you can see them, and move forward from there with that loud voice, with that commanding body language. Now, you had mentioned about doing some planning with your kids as well, that a lot of what you're talking about here seems to be preparation, thinking about ahead of time what you're going to do, because you sitting in your living room thinking about scenarios is smarter than you in the moment, flooded with adrenaline.
Definitely.
So we can do preparation as a parent, we can do preparation as a person, but sounds like we could also do some training with our kids about, if mama says this word, your job 10-year-old is to grab the 5-year-old and head towards the nearest source of light as fast as you can,
Yeah.
screaming all the way, or whatever it is. Whether, get behind me, put your hand in my back pocket so I know where you are. Whatever the specific situation is, have a plan, practice that plan, much like you do your fire plan.
Exactly.
Are there some plans that you could recommend for the moms out there?
More than anything else, just communication with them. We all know the standard stranger danger. Don't go with somebody that you don't know. Make sure that you're in a lit environment if it's at night. Know where parents are at all time. If you have a cell phone, that's one of the best things that you can use to call for help. Know how to dial 911, even if the hairs on the back of your neck are standing up. A lot of people believe prevention is paranoia, and you got to debunk that myth. It's not paranoia, it's acceptance and awareness. So if they have a couple steps that they can do from simple to extreme, they've got tool set that most kids don't have.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that preparation versus paranoia. I also see that often phrased about, I don't want to run an attacker drill with my kids because I don't want to make them afraid. I don't want to scare them. But generally speaking, your kids are aware of these dangers.
Yeah.
And they're afraid of these dangers already. I remember being 4 years old and afraid of an intruder coming into the house. And if they see us avoiding the topic, getting uncomfortable as the topic comes up, they just learn to be more afraid. Whereas if what they see the adults that they trust, the adults that they model themselves after, acknowledging, as you said, acknowledging the possibility, and then making a plan for it, that does the opposite and alleviates their fear, just like it does for adults. Preparation is the antidote to fear, no matter how old you are, no matter how large you are. So, Rebecca, this is not your first rodeo in terms of interviews, in terms of speaking about this topic. I'd like to ask you, what do you wish people asked you about more?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure I know the answer to that one. I've had such fantastic questions. I will tell you what I would like to tell you about more would be
Absolutely.
the empowering part of martial arts. And I know this is about self-defense, but they go hand in hand. A lot of people think that getting their kids into karate is going to turn them into bullies, or it's going to make them fight, or it's going to put people into a negative mindset. But martial arts is what saved me. I had a very difficult childhood. I couldn't guarantee my own safety when I was a child, but just having the skill set and the awareness and the belief that I was worth fighting for when I first started taking martial arts was incredibly empowering to me. So, it's a peaceful art in that if you plan for war, then you can be comfortable in peace, but you have to have a plan. You have to know it's possible. You got to know it's going to be there. And the empowerment that comes from, for me, just hitting the bag and knowing that I could apply power to target if I wanted to, that means everything to me.
And again, the bad guys are going to see that in you, in the way you walk, in the way you respond to their presence.
Absolutely.
And if you spend time with people who work in martial arts or in the military or police, or also many of the criminal elements, you'll notice the real expression of exactly what you're talking about, where the most dangerous person in the room is usually also the mellowest and the nicest.
Yes, you want to have that hiding up your sleeve.
Yeah, because they tend to be, as you say, empowered, confident in themselves. They don't feel the need to go inflict themselves upon others to make themselves feel good, because they already feel good. That addresses that concern about, well, my kid's going to turn into a Cobra Kai style bully if they learn martial arts, or that I'll change as a person if I learn these techniques. That instead of, you will change as a person, but not in that bad way, but just in that more empowered way. I feel like martial arts very often doesn't really change people so much as reveals part of them that have been waiting there the whole time.
Well said.
I try. All right. So, Mrs. Knight, thank you so much for coming on today. I think there's a huge wealth of information that our viewers are going to really appreciate. And I really just want to reiterate what you said about being empowered, about being a woman, being small in stature, regardless of your gender, is not a barrier to self-defense, and is not a barrier to being worth defending. And I really appreciate the advice you've given us today about how to defend yourself. And again, if you are in the Tucson area, or now during this mobile training era of COVID, please do look up American Institutes of Kempo. They've been at it for 20 years in this incarnation and been part of a martial arts tradition that I'm also proud to be a part of, that has been going back for decades further than that. So thank you all very much for listening today. Thank you, Mrs. Knight, for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And more importantly, thank you for the service you're doing to the community by bringing these topics to table and putting it out there for people to create that awareness.
Outstanding. Well, thank you again, and we'll see everybody next time. Be sure to check the show notes for some of the resources we talked about today. Thanks for watching today. If you loved what you saw, please do hit the subscribe button and the like button. Tell your friends. Click on those links above to go to the full version of this video or another of our shorter synopses. Thanks again. Hope to see you soon.